This is a share about how the mitzvos of the day, which we're going to point out are quite strange. Each one is a little bit stranger than the other. Um, that is the mitzvos of getting drunk on Purim, right? Which is part of the Seudah. There's no mitzvah to get drunk on Purim at night. Just people are very machmir on getting drunk, so they get drunk at night. There's no mitzvah of getting drunk in the day except during the meal. But nobody wants to wait till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so they do like what we would call maybe mahadrin. I call it just getting drunk, but that's one of the mitzvos connected with the Suda, which the Suda itself is a mitzvah, right? But on many Yom Tovim, we have a Suda, right? What's unique about this Suda is the fact that you get drunk, but not that you drink, because the Gemara already says it. It's brought in Shulchan Aruch, ein simcha b'basar v'yayin. You can only have simcha if you have meat and wine. No offense to the vegans, right? I don't mean to be politically incorrect, but that's what the Gemara says. I'm just quoting the Gemara in the Shulchan Aruch, right? Ein mitzvah, ein simcha b'basar v'yayin, the simcha. And of course, on Purim, we do have clearly the concept of simcha. La Yehudim haisa oira v'simcha, right? So it was clear in the Megillah in a number of places that there's a concept of simcha, but generally simcha means to drink wine. It doesn't mean to get drunk, right? Nobody says on Pesach or on Shavuos or on Sukkot you have to get drunk. Some people may get drunk after 4 cups of wine at the Seder, but that's the point is not to get drunk. The point is to drink 4 cups, and if it's too hard on you for Pesach to drink 4 cups of wine, you can drink grape juice, you can drink 5.5%, not 14%, right? But here, it seems like a mitzvah to drink the 14%, right? So you will get drunk. Why? Because there's a separate idea at Purim, which we'll see in these sources, to get drunk. And of course, that's unique about Purim, the Suda of Purim, which doesn't appear by any other Suda shel mitzvah. With regard to Mishloach Manot, there's also something unique, as we'll see, because when you send gifts to people, right, you just send a gift to a person to create a certain feeling of love for your neighbor, right? I think it's important that before Yom Tif, you'll send something. And we have sources that say not only on Purim do you have to send gifts to neighbors or friends, even on regular Yom Tif, we'll see. Certainly we see it on Rosh Hashanah. We'll see it soon in the text. But on Purim, what's unique is that in the Mishnah Berurah, someone raises an issue. Rabbi Yaakov Ettlinger from the late early 1800s, if I remember correctly, in Germany, raises the issue of, am I allowed to give someone Mishloach Manot by myself, or do I dafka have to make a messenger? And can the messenger be a child? Does it have to be an adult? Since there's an obligation to do it through a messenger, maybe you have to do it through an adult. This is all questions in the Mishnah Berurah, and I think Rabbi Yaakov Ettlinger, in his responsa work called Binyan Sion, comes out you should do it through a shliach dafka. So why are we getting so worked up about, sending a gift dafka through a messenger and not by myself? What is that trying to tell me over here, right? So that's the second unique aspect of the mitzvos of Purim, right? The third one, of course, is sending matanot levyonim, right? To sending gifts to the poor, which, of course, before every Yontif, we'll see before Pesach, we have the concept of Mos Chitim to help the poor. Before every Yontif, we do that. But there's something unique about helping the poor on Yontif, which we'll see clearly in the Rambam when we compare what the Rambam writes about Yontif to what the Rambam writes about Purim. Okay, so let's begin. And we'll talk first about the sending of gifts, right? How it differs on Purim than it does on other holidays. So let's begin with number one on the top right. It says Nehemiah. Okay, does everybody see that? Nehemiah on the top right. I don't know. Yeah, on page, I don't know if this is page one, but it says in the middle Purim. Maybe it says one actually. I'm not sure. Okay, but you should have top right. It says Nehemiah Chet Yud. So Nehemiah Chet Yud, it's talking about Rosh Hashanah there. Vayomer lahem. And Nehemiah says to the Jewish people, this is actually important about Rosh Hashanah as well, that you know, because Rosh Hashanah is a little bit of a scary day because it's the Yom Hadin, right? The whole world gets judged, right? So, L'chu ichluj mashmanim ushetu mamtakim v'shulchu manot le'enachon lo ki kadosh hayom la'adonenu. Go and eat, fatty foods, right? And drink sweet drinks, right? It doesn't say anything about wine, but it says sweet drinks, right? It could be sweet wine. Note, here's mishloach manot, le'ein nachon lo, to one that doesn't have. Ki kadosh la'adonenu, because it is a day that's holy for our master, God. V'al te'otzvu, ki chedvas Hashem hi mu'uzchem. And don't be depressed, right? Because the happiness of God is your strength. Okay, so this is we're talking about Rosh Hashanah here. It's very clear if you look at the text in Nehemiah, and yet he tells them, don't be upset, don't cry, don't. It's really a happy day. It's a joyous day, Rosh Hashanah, because when God judges the world, it's clear to us that we're going to benefit from it. Okay, but the part that I want to focus on is shulchu manot le'enachon lo, right? It says, and send portions to those for whom nothing is prepared, meaning they're not necessarily poor, but they didn't just prepare for Rosh Hashanah properly, right? So help people make their Suda on Rosh Hashanah. Okay? So you see this, but it doesn't say over here, there's no din of Mishloach Manot that you have to do it through a Shliach, right? In Shulchan Aruch, I should have put it in here actually, I didn't have the time. In Shulchan Aruch it says, I mentioned that in the Mishnah Berurah brings that the mitzvah is to do through a shliach dafka, and the question is why on Purim are we so careful about doing it through a messenger as opposed to sending it on your own? Even when people come to other people's home, but mishloach manot, if they're sending to someone in the home, they'll ask someone else in the home to give it to, let's say you're sending it to the mom of the home, or you're sending it to your friend. If there are other friends in the home, you'll tell the friend to give it to her as opposed to you giving it directly, because of this idea of mishloach manot through a messenger. And we have to really see what the concept is. Okay, the second thing is matanot levyonim, and it says like this. In Yontif, right, it says, that's number 2, the Rambam Hilchot Yontif, ukisho ochel v'shoteh, v'chayev la'achil lager v'layatom v'almana, im shar aniyim umlalim. You're obligated when you eat and drink on Yontif, which is a mitzvah, to also feed the convert, the person who has no parents, right? The woman who has no husband, right? The widow, the orphan, imshar aniyim umlalim, with the other aniyim, the other poor ones who are unfortunate. Umlal means a person who's like an unfortunate person. Avumisha noel dal sosh chatzero, the one who locks the doors of his courtyard. And the one who locks his door and drinks and eats and drinks with his children, his wife, and doesn't feed and help the poor people, umore nefesh, he had something else over here that's extremely important, right? A person who's bitter of soul, meaning depressed people, people have a hard life. They might not even be poor, but they have a hard life. Ein zu simchas mitzvah, ela simchas kreso. This is not a simcha of a mitzvah, it's a simcha of your stomach. It's a stomach simcha, right? Rambam doesn't mince any words here, right? You could either have on by giving others that are in need, not necessarily poor people over here. It's obviously also poor people, mashkel aniyim, but lamari nefesh too. If you give them, if you don't give them, it's only called not simchas yontif or simchas mitzvah. It's called simchas kreisa. Okay, that is the idea. Okay, that's on every yontif. Now watch what happens on Purim, right? The Rambam could have said, matanot le'evyonim, right, is just like it is on the other yontif. Go check what I wrote in Hilchos Yontif, right? You'll find out. He doesn't do that. He has a separate thing on Purim, right? Listen what he says. Mutav la'odem laharbos b'matanot le'evyonim melaharbos b'sudaso b'shloch manot l'reyav. It's better for a person to give many, la'arbot means to be plentiful of gifts for the poor, than having a nice meal, right? Putting up that roasted duck with stuffing, right? Ubeshloach manot l'reyav, and sending beautiful gifts, right? Mishloach manot, we want to send to our friends some really nice stuff, right? He says it's better to do matanot le'evyonim, okay, than the other two mitzvot. And we have to really understand, why is matanot le'evyonim for the Rambam a central mitzvah, right? They're all mitzvahs, right? The Suda is a mitzvah. That's when we're supposed to get drunk. The Mishloach Manot is a mitzvah. We're supposed to give, a nice gifts of food to different friends, right? But he says there's nothing like Matanot Le'Yom. Why? She'ein sham simcha gedola umafara ela sameach aniyim v'yisomim v'amonot v'gerim. Because there is no simcha greater and more mefoar, means like more beautiful, than to make the hearts of the poor, of the women who are who lost their husband, the women who are widows, and the children who don't have parents, who are Yetomim. V'gerim, and gerim. Shama sameach levo umlalim ha'elu doma l'shchina. Unbelievable, the Rambam says here. One who is masameach, the poor people, the umlalim, which the Rambam already said in Hilchos Yontif, he used that word, ha'elu, doma l'shchina. He's like God. Okay? That's why it's greater, right, to give to the poor than to do the other two mitzvot, because one who makes the hearts of the people who are suffering, makes their hearts happy, doma l'shchina, shenema lachiyos ruach shvalim lachiyos lev nitgaim. Okay? In other words, there's a concept on Yontif, right? On Yontif, there's a mitzvah to help the poor. You know why? Because of Simchat Yontif, to give them simcha. Okay? Here, there's a different idea. It's not just the concept of simcha, mesameach levum lalim, but the sender is doma l'shchina. Right? Normally, we don't talk about the sender. The sender gives the gift to the poor, and the poor becomes happy on Yontif. Here it says, no, the sender itself, there's a concept here on Purim of the sender itself being the Shechina. So when you give to poor people, you're acting like God, because God helps the poor. And the question, of course, is why do we have this concept on Purim? What does Purim have to do with us being the Shekhinah, right? So we have three ideas that are different. We have an idea of Suda with getting drunk. We have an idea of sending gifts, right, to our friends, but only through a shliach, okay, through a messenger. And the third thing is, right, to give the poor people to be Doma L'Shechina, not just to make them happy, but we are Doma L'Shechina. What's that concept have to do with Purim? So we really want to say over here, the important thing over here is that we're going to try to show that all these different additions to the mitzvah, like Adelo Yoda, right, which we're going to see in a minute in the Gemara, that you're going to get drunk until you don't know, which is very, very strange, right? It'll say get drunk. What's this idea? Get drunk till you don't know, right? And sending through shliach, right? And the third thing, acting like God, right? All those themes are going to be in the Megillah, and that's why we have to play them out on Purim. Okay, so first let's take a look at number 5, excuse me. It says like this in the Gemara: Amar Ravach, Mechayev Adam Lipsume Bepurya Adalo Yoda Beit Or Haman Baruch Mordechai. The Gemara says that a person is obligated, right? It says Chayev, to drink on Purim. Bepurya is Aramaic for Purim, until he doesn't know the difference between Or Haman and Baruch Mordechai. Why do I have to get to that level of drunkenness? It's a pretty scary level to think that, that I exchange Haman for Mordechai. I got to get pretty drunk for that. Okay? So you see from this Gemara, and again, people think this has to do with the day, getting drunk in the day. It has to do with the Su'udah. And in the Gemara later on, it's clear that it's in the Su'udah, and has nothing to do with the day. You're supposed to be drinking in the Su'udah, and that's when the mitzvah is, and we'll talk about that. Okay, so let's talk about first the Adalo Yoda. What does that actually mean, right? By the way, there are other explanations about Adalo Yoda. What it doesn't actually mean you have to get that drunk, but we're not going to go into it right now. From the simple pshat in the Gemara, it looks like I'm supposed to get, I don't know what the expression is, but when they say you're getting completely, I forget what they use, which word they use for it, but completely, drunk, right? That you don't really know what's going on around you, right? Maybe someone can help me with the right word. Not stoned, but
sloshed.
what? Sloshed?
Or
Okay,
trashed, wasted.
or hammered. Good,
We can keep going.
That's Adelo Yoda for sure, right? Okay. In my day, I think they used to say something else, but okay. I guess in every generation, they have their unique wording, right? So we're going to find here that there's a theme, and this is true about the Megillah and Tanakh is general. When you see in a chapter in Tanakh that a word is constantly being used, right, you know that that's a central theme. You'll see it a lot in the Nevi'im Achronim, where the Navi in a chapter will be talking to the Jewish people and constantly repeating a certain word. Okay? Here, we're going to see that there's going to be this word and concept appeared in the Megillah many times. You may not have noticed it till now, but now you'll notice it. Let's take a look in number 6. Ubechol yom v'yom Mordechai mitalech lifnei chatzar beit hanashim ladat et shlom Esther ma'yasaba. As you remember, that Mordechai, when Esther, the Beis Yaakov girl, was taken, right, to the palace of the king, Mordechai was nervous, and for good reason, right? So Mordechai would make sure to go past the courtyard of the women to know how Esther's doing And not only to know what to do, but what's going to happen to her. He was like concerned, what's going on over here, right? How is she feeling today, and what's going to happen to her in the future? And Rashi actually mentions over there, right? Towards the end of that Rashi below, V'chein Mordechai Omar lo ira letzadek zu shetilokach lemishkav Achashverosh ela atid lokum lo shir Yisrael. Mordechai wanted to know Maye Osaba, what's going to happen, because Mordechai was already thinking that this Tzadekis Esther, this really, really Tsanua Beis Yaakov girl, right? How could she come to be taken to the king's home to sleep with him? It must be that something's going to happen in the future that the Jewish people need her for. So he kept his eyes and ears open because of this. That's what Umayeyasaba means, to know. But what does it say over here? Ladat et Shlom Esther. He wanted to know, right? Before we had Adelo Yada, until you don't know, right? Here it's Ladat, to know. Next, number 7. Vayomer HaMelech HaChamim Yodei HaItim. And the king, when Vashti, right, refused to come before the king in her robes and everything, in her beautiful robes, and show how beautiful she was, he didn't know what to do. So he spoke to his wise people, Yodei HaItim, the ones who know the times, right? In other words, when you want to make a decision, you want people to know the times that you're living in. Is it a time when there's a lot of feminists out there and they're going to take advantage of the situation that Vashti didn't want to come? So they, Yodei HaItim, they know the times. They know the history. They know the history of the past. They know what's going on now. So it says Yodei HaItim, the ones who know. Vayivoda hadover leMordechai. When Mordechai saves the king from the 2 scoundrels that want to assassinate him, so it says Vayivoda hadover leMordechai. The thing became known, right? Again, the word Yada in the Megillah. It seems to be a theme running through the Megillah. Then it says at the end, right? When the Jewish people are actually being served notice that they're going to be killed, that they're hanging up notices throughout the kingdom, they're going to be killed in a year from now, right? It says in number 9, Va'ir Shushan Navocha. It doesn't say they know, it says they're confused. They didn't know, in other words. Mordechai Yoda, right? But Mordechai did know, right? And then it says when Mordechai is dressed already in rags, in sackcloth, it says Vatikra Esther latach. Esther called, that's number 10, Misoresei Hamelach Asher Emid Lefoneh Vatatzaveu al Mordechai Lodat Mazeh al Mazeh. To know what's going on. Why is Mordechai dressed in sackcloth? Right? Why did he rent his garments? Ladat, she wants to know. She doesn't know. Right? And then this is the final blow. This is the final thing. Number 11. Mordechai says to Esther, go plead with the king. And Esther says, I can't. King will have my head because I haven't been called for 30 days, right? Mordechai answers her very strongly. If you are quiet at this time and you don't help the Jews, the Jewish people will be saved from another place, right? It could either be you or it'll be someone else. And you will be lost. And who knows, right? So this Megillah is about knowing. Okay? Umiyodei, and who knows, imla eight kazoti got malchut. Who knows, maybe this is the reason you became the queen, right? Mordechai is figuring it all out now, right? He's figuring out, wait a minute, now I understand why years ago this Beis Yaakov girl was taken to be the queen of Persia, because now we need her, right? And that's what Ibn Ezra says on 12. Late Tam, the understanding. Shema gat Malchus Ella Bavura Eitazot to Israel. This is the reason why you got here. Well, you have to seize the moment, because this is when the Jews need you, right? And if you don't seize the moment now, as far as you're concerned, the Jews are going to be killed. But as far as I'm concerned, someone else will save them. And your whole mission was not met, right? You have a mission and it was not met, right? But here's the idea, right? That the idea in the Megillah Esther of this idea of yediyah, knowing. Now, why is that so important, right? Because we have to realize, and that's why we have this mitzvah on Purim, Adelo Yoda, right? That really the central theme in the Purim story is that we don't know. Even Mordechai, he says, Umi Yodeya, who knows? This is at the point of no return, right? That's where the most important yediyah is. He says, Umi Yodeya late kazot, right? He got la malchut. Mordechai is saying we could never 100% know. The non-Jews think Yodei Ha'itim. They know. But Mordechai says, Mi Yodea. Who knows, right? Esther says, Lodat, right? She says, Lodat Mazev al Mazeh. She doesn't know what's going on over here. There is a riddle here that we can't solve. Why is Mordechai acting the way he's acting, right? There's a lot of lack of knowledge in the Purim story in order to create the mitzvah when you have your Suda to get to a place that I don't know. Who knows? God knows. God knows. I don't know. Okay? That's the idea over here, that we don't know. We could think we know, and Mordechai says maybe we know, right? But we don't know. And that's the important idea, is at the turn of events, at the moment of truth, Mordechai says Umi Yodeya. So we have an obligation, Adelo Yoda. We always think we know. During the whole year, we know, right? We can judge pretty good. But on Purim, we say, you know what? The whole story of Purim is a miyodea, is who knows such a thing, right? We don't know. Until the last moment, we don't know. Mordechai says, maybe this is the reason. Esther says, maybe I'll get through to the king, and maybe I'll be able to get rid of Haman. We don't know. We have to leave a lot of things in our equation to God. Okay, that's the first idea. The second idea is the what do you call it? The mitzvah of Mishloach Manot. Mitzvah of Mishloach Manot is dafka through a shliach. Why? Because the Megillat Esther is full of the concept of shlichut. Okay? I'm not going to go into all the cases here. We don't really have them here, but there's a lot of shlichut in the Megillat Esther. They send the people, the shlichim, out to announce to kill the Jews, right? There's shlichut there, right? But there's the biggest shlichut is Esther Hamalka, right? Esther has a shlichut. This I mentioned this in the class, that when Mordechai says, leit kazot gat la malchus, that is the concept of shlichut. What does that mean? That you have a mission now, right? Every person's mission is a God-given mission, right? Whether you're an atheist, whether you're a non-Jew or a Jew, you have a mission, right? An atheist doesn't know that God gave the mission, right? But we as religious Jews know that every human being has a mission. Moshe Rabbeinu was sent on a shlichut, right? Moshe Rabbeinu, let's see if we have it over here. Let's see if we have the shlichut of Moshe Rabbeinu here. Let me see. We don't have it over here, but there is a source in Chumash that Moshe Rabbeinu was sent, right? Sent on a shlichut to take the Jews out of Egypt. Moshe wants to refuse the shlichut like Esther, and God says to him, I'm not allowing you to do it. You're going to be the shliach whether you like it or not. And Moshe Rabbeinu, of course, says, how can I go to Paro? I'm a kvad peh, kvad lashon. How can I go? Because God says to him, Ki ani itach, ki itach anochi. I am with you. In other words, when a person's sent on a shlichut, every person has a mission in life. They have to realize God gave them that mission. So what does that mean? That the mishaleach is with them. They're going on God's mission, and God is with them over there. And that's why with Esther, she had to feel that God is with her, and she does feel that way. How do we see that? It says in number 15, right? Or number 16, excuse me, on the page. It says, Vayi bayom shlishi vatilbash Esther malchut. Okay? It's Esther wore her queenly garments, right? And the simple pshat is that she wanted to appear beautiful for the king, right? And she wore her queenly garments, okay? Tilbash Esther Malchut. So that's what Rashi says right below. Malchut, big day Malchut. V'rabotenu amru. Our rabbi said something else. It doesn't mean she was beautifying herself. Amru shalaf sharuach hakodesh. Okay. She wore upon herself. Malchut means Malchut Shamayim. She wore the clothing of God, like it says by right below in 17. V'ruach Hashem lavsha et Gidon. The Spirit of God adorned Gidon. There it doesn't mean clothing. It says the Spirit of God. So when it says Vatil Bashesta Malchus, it means she started feeling, I'm on a shlichut here. That's the way we're supposed to feel in life. I'm here on a shlichut. Sometimes I have to find out what it is. Sometimes it takes time. Did Esther know what a shlichut was until Mordechai told her? No, she absolutely did not know. Right? It didn't dawn upon her. Even after Mordechai said, go pray for the Jews to the king. Go request from the king to save the Jews. She says, I can't go. So she wasn't aware of her shlichut until Mordechai said, Umi odeil na'it kazot higat la malchut. Right? So first of all, you have the idea in that pasuk. And second thing, you have shlichut. And that's why in the Mishloach Manot, we dafka have shlichut. You can't do it by yourself. We have to play out the idea of shlichut, that Esther is a sholeach, and she's a shliach, and that we're shlichim also. So we have to send it through a shliach in order to play out this idea that in the Megillah, at the point of no return, what changed everything was that Esther felt, I am putting on the garments of Ruach HaKodesh. I am now, Ruach HaKodesh doesn't mean all of a sudden she was shaking or something. Ruach HaKodesh means that she had this certain feeling that she's doing something for God here. What's that? There's no better word for than that. Mission, shlichut, right? What we call mission in Hebrew is called a shlichut, right? And that's why you have on Purim this idea. Okay? And then you have the third thing. Okay? What is the third thing? The third thing is Matanot Levyonim. And we said Purim is unique about Matanot Levyonim in a way that Yontif is not, because in Yontif, Matanot Levyonim, you have to give for the poor, right? In fact, the Ramah in Hilchot Pesach starts off Hilchot Pesach with, don't forget the poor people, to send them flour to make matzahs, right? So in every holiday, we have this, right? And you should be very aware of it because of what the Rambam says, because if you don't feed the poor, you're feeding your stomach and you're not feeding Simchas Yontif, right? But on Purim, the Rambam said, right? Shamasamech levum lalim ha'elu doma l'shchina. That he doesn't say on Yontif. He only says on Purim. So why did the Rambam write Dafka? It's true on Yontif too. I'm a Samech, I'm like the Shechina, right? Why Dafka on Purim does he write it? So this must be something unique to Purim. What is unique to Purim about this? On Purim, God is not in the Megillah, right? Not in the Megillah, right? But his not being in the Megillah tells us he's completely in the Megillah, right? Because we begin to see how everything plays out. And one thing could be a coincidence, two things, but so many coincidences in the Megillah, it's hard to believe that that is not behind everything is God, okay? So let's say, for instance, the fact that Vashti is fired from being the Malka, right? Well, at least say that she's taken away from being the queen of Persia in order to make room for Esther. That was no coincidence, right? We see at the end when the Jews need her. There was no coincidence that Mordechai saves the king, right, from two people who plan to assassinate him, because at the end, when things have to turn around, v'nafochu, right, the first thing is the king can't sleep at night, and they read to him that Mordechai had done this. Had Mordechai not done this, we wouldn't have that. And if that wouldn't have happened, so then Mordechai would not have been on top of the world after that, being on top of the king's horse, and with the king's clothing and the king's crown, right? And that all led to Haman's downfall. So we needed this, right? So this was not a coincidence, right? That Esther became queen and that Mordechai had saved the king, right? This was all going to be helpful for years later. At the time, we didn't know anything, right? It seemed like just events that took place. B'mikreh. There was no plan over here. It just happened, right? So here we see clearly that God is actually running everything around, and they dafka didn't want to put God in there, so God will remain behind the scenes. Why? Because we have to know for us that even if God is not appearing, if it's not Yetziat Mitzrayim, right? God is still here. Sometimes he's here, right? Very clearly. And sometimes he's hiding behind something and you can't really see him. But all the workings are happening through God. Things are happening through God and they're not coincidental. And that's what the Rambam puts in over here, that the most important thing on Purim is not the Sudah and getting drunk. It's not Mishloach Manot, but the Rambam says, Mutav lan laharbot b'matanot le'avyonim laharbot b'suda mishloach manot l'reya. Okay? Why? Because when you do that on Purim, you're doma l'shchina. When you give your friend gifts, you're not doma l'shchina. When you have the suda, you're not doma l'shchina. But we want the dimyon to shchina with regard to the poor people. You know why? Because the Jewish people had no hope here. They gave up hope. There was no way out. And who came around? Number one, the shlichut of Esther. Number two, God behind the scenes was pulling he was pulling all the different strings here, right? And that's what we have to know. When it comes to push and shove, right? We're poor people, right? We're poor. And what does it mean when you're poor? It means that, the Gemara says, and it's here in the sources, Esther wrote in the sources, that a poor person is doma lamate. There's a few people that are as if they're not alive, right? Why? In the second page in number 2, it says in Rashi, at the end of Rashi, va'ani choshev kemei. A poor person is like a dead person. Why? The Maharal says, if you look at number 3, va'ani ein lo chiyus mitzad atzma mitzad acherim. The ani is like a person who's dead because he doesn't live on his own. He only lives through others. His life is through others. So he doesn't make a living. And therefore, he lives off others, so his life is not his own. That's the way the Jews felt in Shushan. They felt we have to give up hope. Who we can rely on. And that's why it says by Esther, right? Esther says, when she comes to the king, right? Esther says, I'm going to the king, right? I'm going to go to the king, but kasher avadati. And that's in number 5 on the second page, right? It says, number 5, ubechein avo el hamelech asher lo kadat v'kasher avadati. When I will, just like I will be destroyed, I will be destroyed, right? Meaning there's no hope. When there's no hope, that's when God steps in. That's always the way God works. When we're out of complete hope, we're already in a Holocaust. And that's when God steps in. It says, there's hope, right? So that's why it's important. The ani who has nothing, who does he rely upon? He can only rely upon God, right? God, will you send me a shliach? And that's what it says in the Rambam, that we, in that sense, we are doma l'shchina, because when no one else helps, God comes through. So that is the main theme in the Haggadah, in the Megillah, Shel Purim. The main theme is that God's behind everything, and therefore, to give the ani is acting on Purim, is acting more than just helping him have simcha. It's acting like the Shechina, because we want that concept being brought out on Purim more than any other holiday, because on Purim, God is missing from the Megillah, and therefore, we want to let you know he's missing and he's completely there at the same time. Purim Sameach, guys.